Hello and welcome to the channel. A couple of weeks ago I came across a couple of motherboards and bought them both battery damaged. I'm not quite sure if they work. There's a socket 3 one for a 486 and a 386 motherboard. So in this video we're going to take a look at the 386, see if you can clean it up, see if you can get it booting up, and then have a think about maybe building a system around it. These two boards both came in various states of disrepair. There's obvious corrosion around the battery on both of them. The vendor that sold the 486 board had removed the battery, though it still needs tidying up. And on the 386 board, it doesn't look too badly damaged, but the battery's still on there, so I'll have to get that off, and it's pretty filthy as well. So the first board is a Micronics 486 socket 3 board. It's got a full complement of cache on there, which is always nice. It's got some VLB slots on there, which I've never really had to play around with before, so I'm looking forward to that. And my plan for this is to make an SX25 system, because that's what I had back in the day. But that's going to be for another video. For this one, we're going to be concentrating on the 386, and that's going to be the system that I build first. The 486 SX25 will have to wait, because here we've got the 386 motherboard with the 40 MHz AMD 386DX on board already with a full complement of cache. So I'm looking forward to building this, as I never had a 386 back in the day. I jumped straight from a 286 to a 486, so I'm looking forward to having an experience with this. Back of the board looks nice and clean, but the front is just really caked in crap and dust, so it needs a good clean. So this motherboard uses the Opti 82C495 SLC chipset. There's space there for a 387 Maths coprocessor, American Megatrends BIOS and keyboard controller, 128K of outboard cache here, because I don't believe the AMD 40 MHz chip has any cache built into it. Little bit of corrosion around the battery. It doesn't seem to have come through to the back, which is good. 5 16-bit ISA slots, 1 8-bit, and it's a dinky tiny little motherboard. This, never seen one quite this small, so don't know what form factor that is. And there's 8 slots for 32-pin memory modules. And then we've got our AMD 38640. I believe this was the fastest true 386 chip made, 32-bit, no level 1 cache, and apparently gave some of the early 486s a run for its money too. But just look at all of this caked in grime and goo and shit. This thing needs a clean urgently, and that's what we're going to do first. So all the usual stuff. Blast it with some canned air first of all to clear any loose stuff. Then hit it with the anti-static brush to get out the more stubborn stuff. Nice, look at all that crumbly shit coming out of there. Little rub with some IPA and some cotton buds, and also got a bit of a scrub under the running kitchen tap, so it's looking a bit better now. Time to get the offending barrel battery off there and have a look underneath and see what we've got. There wasn't really much corrosion here. I used some white wine vinegar on some cotton buds to clean it up, let it fizz a bit, and then cleaned it off with some IPA. There was some more stubborn stuff on some of the headers, so I took a little needle file to that to kind of scrape it off, and then used white wine vinegar and IPA to clean those up also. Finally, probably quite controversially, I decided I was going to replace the offending barrel battery with a brand new barrel battery, just because I wanted to make this system look like it used to, being my first 386, and it's not like this will ever go unattended and be watched carefully. It will never be shoved in a cupboard and allowed to leak ever again. Time to think about testing this thing out. So I've got some memory for it, and I've got an I/O controller card. These aren't necessarily the final components I'd use in a build, but I'm just going to put some stuff on here just to see if we can boot it up and get into the BIOS. I just found out I don't actually have much in the way of ISA graphics cards in my collection. In fact, I currently only have one spare, and that's this chips card, which came with a collection of quite interesting old things, which will be another video for another time, but it will do just to test this board. Floppy disk, power supply, bunch of cables, keyboard, and let's see if we can get this thing to fire up. Fire up, it did not, and this goes to show my naivety with this kind of generation of machines and some of the early ones, and at that time I wasn't really upgrading because I couldn't afford it and such. But I put in 2 memory modules here, and there's 2 banks of 4 each, and you need to fill them. So 4 memory modules, and things were looking a bit better. Once the memory bank was full with 4 1MB sims, it was at least trying to boot, but I was getting a bunch of floppy disk errors here, so I tried a whole bunch of different drives, which didn't seem to make any difference, though I know some of those drives are good, so I guess it's time to take a look in the BIOS and see what we can see in there. Ah yes, the date. It is no longer 1993, so let's see if that new battery that I put in there will actually do its job. And noticing that this has been set to defaults, or it's still got old config in there. It's got a 1.2MB 5¼ drive listed for floppy A, and that probably explains some of the problems I've been having getting my floppy to work. Getting my floppy to work? That didn't come out right at all. Geez, just look at the colours you can select on this BIOS. It's like a psychedelic nightmare. You need sunglasses just to look at it. But God, you can have it any colour you like. So, 1 step forward, 1 step back. So it's clearly trying to read the drive now. So now it's telling me that it knows there's a disk in there. But it's a diskette boot failure, so it doesn't recognise it as a boot disk. This is my Windows 95 boot disk. So I guess I'll have to go out and try some different disks. Tried a bunch of different boot disks to no avail, so really that only leaves the cable as the most likely culprit. So I was using this one spot cable with just a single connector on either end and wondered if that was the issue, so I'll try a few different cables and see what happens. Indeed, it was the cable, so I didn't like that one with just a single connectors on either end. I have a bunch of other ones that I tried which have the multiple connectors for 5¼ and A and B drives with the twist, etc., and it works fine with all of those. So it allowed me to boot, but I tried to use the DOS 6.2 disk that I was originally using, and it still didn't like that, even though that worked with other machines. So I'm using an IBM DOS V5 disk here, and I've been wanting to try this IBM install for a while just to see if it's different to the MS version, and I'm going to be loading that probably on the final build, but it's all working now, and that's cool. So everything's cool. It's booting into a DOS disk. It's booting into the BIOS. I think it's fairly safe to assume that this is going to be good for a build. Looking at this BIOS, there's an absolute crap load of settings in here. I don't know whether back then there was a sort of differentiation between enthusiast BIOSes and casual BIOSes like you kind of get now. You buy a basic system, you get this really basic BIOS that doesn't let you do any things of memory and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know, back then it's just everybody got everything all the time, but there's an absolute shitload of stuff to set in here, so it'd be interesting to have a bit of a mess around with that when it comes to do the build. But yeah, looking forward to having a good play with this once I get it into a case and put some stuff on it. I did find some information on this online. Looking through various sort of maps of different motherboard layouts, I did actually find this model that was made by a company called BK or Bectronic Technology Inc., the model number being a BEK3709, and indeed it was this that drew my attention to the 2 memory banks, and that one of them would need filling, though if I'd looked a bit closer that is plainly marked on the silk screen as well. It's always helpful when you can find information like this, and this company BK, though I've never personally heard of them, are obviously well known, and there's plenty of information about them and the various models that they make on sites like the Vogon's website. And it looks like they're an American company based in the US in New Jersey, though I guess they possibly had other factories and things in other parts of the country. Having the documentation always makes things like this much easier and therefore much more pleasurable, so it gives you your options for expansion. I mean, my processor's soldered onto the board here, but I do have a 387 socket, and it tells me what's what with my memory and jumper settings, so that's always a good thing to know. So everything works as regards the motherboard, which is cool, and the more I've messed about with this while just sort of getting it working and stuff, I'm really enjoying messing about with my first 386, and I want to put it in a box. So I've got 2 potential cases from about the right era, the first of which is this mini tower, and it ticks all the boxes. It's got this really funky turquoise highlighting on the button and that little stripe down the front. It's got some original local small manufacturer's sticker on the front, which I kind of want to leave. I did think originally I could put one of those sort of aftermarket 386 stickers on there, but you know, that's the thing that was put on it when it was made back God knows when. It's got the turbo button, it's got the megahertz LED, it's got everything. The problem with this, it's a bit dinked, it's got a few chips on the plastic around the edge, and the frame is bent. So this is going to be kind of, if I use this case, it's going to be a bit of a restoration job as well, which I want to restore this case because it's a lovely little case anyway, so I'm liking the idea of using this. The other option I have to hand is this really very cool new in box small low profile case, AT case, which has got a power supply in it as well as the other one. This is immaculate and requires no restoration, but it has its own issues, and that is that it requires some kind of riser card. So this, while it would require no restoration on the case, would require some kind of little project to create that. It looks like a double-sided riser card. It's got 2 ISA slots on one side presumably, and 1 ISA slot on the opposite side of the card, giving you 3 in total. And I've looked all over the place, and it's hard enough to find just 2 ISA slot riser cards anyway. There's plenty of 3s around, and it would be a little project to either build something or take an existing 3 slot card and figure out if I can cut it down somehow. So this has its own set of separate challenges, which would be to create that riser card. Of course, there is a third option of just buying a nice ready to rock case off eBay or somewhere, but I've got these 2 cases to hand, and they both need their little problems sorting out, so I'm going to use one of them for this. So I don't know, if you've watched this and you have any opinions, please put them in the comments below, and we'll see which one we go with. But that's pretty much it for this video. The 386 board works. I've got the cases that need to build a nice little system, and I'm looking forward to getting cracking with this. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, I hope you consider giving me a thumbs up or subscribing, and I hope you check back with the channel sometime in the near future. Thanks for watching.